To touch this ancient treasure can mean death, but the safety and well-being of an entire people depend on their retaining possession of it. What is the mystery of the priceless two-headed bull for which men fight and die? When the priceless object suddenly disappears, the Phantom and his beautiful sweetheart Diana are drawn into a fantastic adventure that leads from the jungle to the harem of a potentate. The Story of the Phantom, Volume 15, The Curse of the Two-Headed Bull. The Phantom, nemesis of evildoers everywhere, faces overwhelming odds in this fast-moving tale of evil and corruption, based on the world-famous adventure strip created by Lee Falk and read in 40 languages by 100 million people every day all over the world.
Hello and welcome back to this damn full idealistic crusade, all Phantom fans. For those who came in late, I've been reviewing all of the wonderful Avon paperback novels from the 1970s that were all novelized and based on original newspaper strip stories by Lee Falk for his character, the iconic Phantom, the ghost who walks himself. Now, this is the 15th and final of these books, entitled The Curse of the Two-Headed Bull, and like certain of the books in this series, was actually written by Lee Falk himself, getting to basically novelize and expand upon his original newspaper strip story. The overall novels can be a little bit mixed if you read all 15, because Falk only wrote certain ones and the rest were ghost-written. Most were by Ron Goulart under a pen name, but as I've talked about in books 13 and 14, I think overall of the 15 books that the two that precede this last volume are probably the weakest overall, and that seems to be mostly because they were done by one-time writers for these particular Phantom books, and it may just be a case of they were not as attuned to what the project was, or that the stories themselves were from an earlier era of Phantom stories, because of course the Phantom started in 1936, and by the time of these novels had reached a matured type of storytelling, because of course these were done in the early to mid 1970s. So the previous book, The Assassins, was based on a much earlier story, whereas this was based on a story that was actually quite recent, having been done relatively just before this book came out. And as I've said in all my reviews of these, that it's not really fair to compare the other books to the Lee Falk written ones, because the ones that he wrote himself have the best sense of the character, since this is the character's creator and writer actually getting to novelize his own story. And so it, once again, in this volume, you have the requisite sense of the Phantom's humor, his good nature, but also a great sense of pulp adventure and danger. And key to the overall enjoyment is wonderful interaction between the Phantom and Diana Palmer, and she actually gets to get involved in the story, and those are probably my favorite types of Phantom stories, where she gets to get in on the action and they have a nice working dynamic back and forth, and the requisite wonderful banter back and forth. But here, it's also an interesting story hook, because as the cover and title indicates, the two-headed bull is a particular sacred statue for a particular group in the Phantom's home country of Bengala, with a particular legend surrounding it that should anyone who is not of that particular people handle this object, that they themselves will perish and die. This is, of course, also a fabulously beyond valuable object that is encrusted in jewels and absolutely beautiful. So, of course, it's extremely desirable for someone to try and steal it, and it is merely this supposed legend that has kept people from doing so. But, of course, someone took it upon themselves to actually abscond with the incredible two-headed bull statuette, and now, on top of that, the entire village where it had been kept is now in a woeful state of disrepair and is now facing all kinds of bad luck. So, of course, it's a very sort of classical pulpy idea that if a village has a sacred object, or an object with some sort of significance attached to it, as soon as that gets removed, everything goes to hell, essentially. And that's what's happened to this village, and the Phantom is informed of this and then picks up the trail, which leads him to London. So this is an adventure that does have the majority of it actually set in the UK, and you get the wonderful sense of globetrotting that is in a lot of Phantom tales. And this is is where Diana comes in, and she gets to not only actually meet back up with her betrothed, but actually get involved in the action. And it's not something she always gets to do, so she's actually kind of enjoying herself. And it's always difficult having a relationship with someone who is, of course, the ghost who walks, and pretty much always on call and on the other side of the world. So anytime they can actually get together is great for both. And of course, the Phantom does not want Diana to get as involved, and she has ideas of her own and manages to insert herself into the mystery plot. We also have great details of the villains, or the criminals who attempt to not only flee with the idol, but also sell it for money, and all of the things that befall them that seem to fit in line with the purported curse surrounding the object, that anyone who handles it who is not of the correct ancestry will die. And people do start dying and keep dying, so it then becomes quickly apparent that perhaps there is something to this legend. We then have further developments that find the Phantom and Diana and all the various criminal factions and the idol itself no longer in London, but in the harem of a corrupt ruler of another country. So we have a real fascinating, very pulp adventure flavor setting for our final climax, and also an interesting sort of change of events that's done well, that then raises the stakes of the drama further and makes the overall story feel less of just a single standalone adventure. This is still a book that's adapted from the original newspaper strip story, which of course had to be designed to be easily read by somebody who's just coming in and reading the 4 panels that day, and that way they need to actually be able to understand the other events. So it's obviously a form of serialized storytelling and telling a standalone story, straightforward adventure. But here, in especially all the Lee Falk written books, he's getting to expand upon his original story, and he's getting to, get more into character nuance and let the events be a bit richer and more detailed. But it's still a straightforward adventure, and it's still a very enjoyable, fast read that you can read in one sitting. But it's also, it feels a bit more satisfying than some of the other Avon books that can be a little bit shorter in terms of the page count, but also feel a little bit, like you're just getting a one and done standalone adventure. Some of the Falk books and some of the other Avon books are actually combinations of multiple stories, which was a good idea to help expand a story idea to novel form by just, sort of mixing together 2 different stories. But here, I think it was helpful that this particular story was a more recent one from the newspaper strip. So I really enjoyed this one, and I thought it was great that since this is the last of the Avon books, that we sort of go out with a high, because this is the last book in the series, and it's once again written by Lee Falk, and all of the Falk written books are easily the best of the Avon novels. And if you were just going to choose a few to try out, you should start with the ones that he wrote himself. And that's, again, it's not to slight the other writers. It's not to say that the other books aren't good, because all 15 are wonderful fun and great adventures, and a great way to get introduced to the character of the Ghost Who Walks. But it's also an unfair comparison, because you have the series creator and writer getting to novelize his own stories. So obviously those particular ones that he wrote are going to be stronger and more fulfilling than the ones written by the other ghostwriters. So I'm glad that book 15 was another Lee Falk written book and has the requisite charm and adventure flavor, and Diana gets to get involved in the action, and so she's a key player. So it's wonderfully fitting that the last Avon Phantom novelization is a Lee Falk written book that is immensely satisfying, and again, one of the best of the 15-book series. So again, this is the Hermes Press reprint, done in the same type of style that does recreate the very pulpy, beautiful original artwork that matches the overall design aesthetic. And because this is their slightly larger, more premium version in terms of the dimensions, it has been expanded a little bit, but it's been nicely transferred. So you really get the beauty of the emerald green of the background color, which is, of course, to tie in to the emerald green of the jeweled 2-headed bull. This artwork was done by George Wilson, who did all of the covers, and all of these are absolutely beautiful and very much the type of incredible pulp artwork that we just don't see anymore. This has the matching spine with all the other Hermes reprints, so they all have these matching white spines. And then here you have another usage of the cover artwork, but with a nice layout to have the original book blurb on the back as well. And then I've always loved that they actually kept the little blurb about the Phantom complete with the skull symbol on the reprints. If my description of the plot did not grab your attention already and make you want to read this, the little blurb about this being volume 15 is,
"The Phantom ambushed in a Sheikh's harem?"
If that doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what will. Again, Hermes has kept the beautiful essay with the Phantom, everything is possible except boredom, by the Sorbonne lecturer that's in a lot of the later Avon reprints. This is one of the best articles about the Phantom and adventure fiction in general, and of course, truer words than the title have hardly ever been spoken. And then all the Avon books have the text version of the original origin story for those who came in late. This is the origin of the Phantom, beautifully told in text form, which is one of the all-time great superhero origin stories, and this is still one of the definitive ones, since, of course, the Phantom was the first costumed superhero in the way we think of them today. And then the reprints have the lovely, easy-to-read text layout and the larger, more premium sizing. So the page count is a little bit lower than the original paperback. That is, of course, smaller. But this is still a lengthier book that, gets up to close to 150 pages in the larger sizing. And, of course, these are very easy to read, and you will pretty much want to read this in one sitting because it's so nicely done that you just can't put it down. Now, the one thing with the Hermes reprints that I've commented on, they do occasionally have a slight typo here and there. I didn't really notice anything major in this one, but some of the later books had a few that definitely caused me to notice them. They're never horrible or terrible or anything, but it is something to consider if you're looking at getting the reprints instead of original Avon paperbacks. As I've said before as well, the original paperbacks were never reprinted before these Hermes reprints, and they're quite expensive and hard to track down. So if you were trying to complete a set of those, you're probably going to spend more than you will for the Hermes reprints. So, these are probably the better idea in terms of being more budget friendly, and it's easy to just order all of these. I will leave a link in the description to Hermes' website for book 15, and they also have a bundle of all 15 reprints at a nice discount. So those are my overall thoughts on the Hermes Press reprint of the 15th and final Avon Phantom novel, The Curse of the Two-Headed Bull, written by series creator and writer Lee Falk. This is a wonderful way to close out the series. It's an unbelievably fun read. It's a great Phantom story, and because it's one of the Lee Falk ones especially, this is one of the best of the Avon series. So if you're curious about these, I do highly encourage anyone to check these out. These are wonderful pulp adventures and wonderful ways to experience Phantom stories, and especially serve as a great introduction to the character if you've never read A Ghost Who Walks tale before. The Hermes reprints are nicely done. They are rather affordable, and you can get the bundle on their website. And it's, of course, much easier to get the reprints than it is original copies. So this is the last in my series on the Avon Phantom stories, and I've had an absolute blast finally getting to read these. And again, they're a wonderful way to experience the character if you've never read a Phantom story before. So I heartily recommend all 15 of these. They're immense fun, but if you're just going to choose one or two, I would say start with the first volume, which also basically retells the origin of the Phantom in book form, and then any of the other Lee Falk written books, particularly also including book 15, Curse of the Two-Headed Bull, which is immense fun. So as always, I do hope my babblings about classic pulp adventure material, pulp fiction, and stories of the Ghost Who Walks himself have been at least somewhat fun and informative. Please do keep supporting independent book publishers where possible by supporting and purchasing books directly from their websites. Again, I'll leave a link to Hermes' website in the description if you're interested in this book. But I just absolutely loved getting to finally read these Phantom novels, and these reprints are very nicely done. So as always, please do keep reading print books, and happy phantoming. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.